We are greeted by the sights of the vast blue sky and the gentle fall of colors in the form of confetti. Words of joy and admiration fill the air as the bystanders cheer a figure walking by. A man donning armor shining brightly made out of the strongest metals that can be found. Accompanied by a red flowy cape and an exquisite longsword on the hip, the city's hero parades down the road on his trusted steed and present themselves as proudly as they can be with their army. The citizens of the city shower them with cheers and love for him and for the Empire, Isgard. A few moments after, we see two young siblings running down the street to make haste so they can make it to the hero's parade. The younger sister of the two falls behind, making the older brother look back at her and tell her to hurry. As much he was frantic on being late, a dark figure walks by him, making him stop at his place. The dark figure can be described as the total opposite of the hero. They donned a dark cloak, showing minimal details of their face. Underneath the cloak was robe-like gear with dark colors. They carry a suspicious sack over the shoulder without giving any hints on what is inside it. This causes the older brother to be cautious around the dark figure and even prevents the younger sister from looking further into the suspicious figure. The sister asks why he stopped her and explains that the dark figure in question is considered as a dark mage, a cursed being. Moments later, we are shown a grand building by a cliff. In the upper floors of the building stands a beautiful blonde maiden watching over the city of Isgard. Her blue eyes reflect the sun as she stares into the distance. Then she is startled as the door of her room swings open, and the sounds of footsteps approach her. As she turns around, the room reveals to be a room for worship. Tall white pillars stand strong and line up to present a grand statue of a beautiful woman who carries a sword and wears a blindfold as she looks down to the floor. The blonde maiden greets her visitor, the dark mage from earlier. The mage in question is named Minold. The suspicious sack that he was carrying was tossed to the floor, revealing its contents. A decapitated head rolls out of the bag. It wears a helmet with spikes and horns that can poke an eye out and a face of a demon. The head marks as a sign that the last threat of Isgard has been eliminated. The maiden wanted to express her thanks to Minold but is cut off by him, demanding she fulfills her end of the bargain immediately. She assures him that it will be done in due time, and reveals Minold's true name, Kim Minjun. The blonde maiden is revealed to be the Saintess, and as much as she tries to express her apologies and gratitude to Minjun, he on the other hand expresses his annoyance and dislike to the Saintess. She asks Minjun if she really needs to fulfill her promise to him, the promise to return Minjun to his original world. He expresses how tired he is and how much he wants to go home. She replies with the disappointment she has because how much ill treatment that has been caused to him will be repaid for, and once again Minjun cuts her off mid-sentence, telling her to stop acting sincere to him and asks her what she will give him. He explains that he was brought to this world by force, was treated like a slave, and for what outcome. He expresses how much he does not want to work with them anymore and proceeds to ask what will be used to compensate him. She tells him that she can give her anything that he desires, and without him, the empire will crumble. He tells her to bring him Korean fried chicken and jokbal, a Korean braised pork dish. The world they currently reside in is more or less a medieval setting, and naturally the food cannot be compared to the food of modern times. He says that it is disgusting, and the high-calorie biscuits that they have been feeding him until now cannot be considered as food, making it questionable on how they can be able to compensate him for his efforts. This flusters the Saintess and asks for something else. Then he strongly expresses that he wants a monstrous computer with incredible specs and the fastest internet connection. He greatly misses collecting rewards from his favorite video game, Dungeon Power Fighter. The Saintess strongly refuses because it is impossible to grant that request due to the lack of technology, and asks him to request something tangible from their current world. She sighs and gives up on trying to sway him and proceeds to begin the return ceremony. They step into a locked room, and inside was a circular room domed with high ceilings. It was the room where Minjun was first summoned in. In the middle of the room is seal. There Minjun will stand upon so the ceremony will begin. The seal lights up, and with it the ceremony begins. The first step is to remove the protection of the saint. It is a seal that prevents Minjun from attacking the Saintess, and he is very eager to be released from its shackles. The Saintess expresses her confusion on why would Minjun give up everything he obtained in Isgard. He replies to her that she should be concerned on what he might do to her once the seal is fully removed. And she replies that she is willing to accept her fate since she was the cause of all this. Now that the seal has been removed, now the removal of Minjun's powers will begin. As the saint explains why his powers should be removed, a dark purple whip wraps around her throat. She is lifted up off the ground by Minjun, and she demands to know why he is doing this. He reveals that he does not want to give up on his powers and drops her to the floor. The Saintess believes that Minjun's plan won't work due to dark magic not being able to open a dimensional portal. But to her surprise, he is still able to open a portal with dark magic. She tries to stop him from doing anything rash due to the risks that portal travel can do. Then he explains that he has practiced this thousands of times to the point he has reached the peak of his dark magic powers. After that he flips her off, then steps into the portal, and then he's gone along with the portal, leaving a frustrated Saint behind. Now in the modern world, an apartment window emits a purple flash and we see Minjun back to his own room in his world. Outside his apartment was a unit of soldiers dispatched to eliminate a threat and finds Minjun walking down a desolated street. The soldiers tried their best to bring Minjun to safety, only to be ambushed by a large dark wolf, and his fate is yet to be revealed. The yells of soldiers telling our protagonist, Minjun, to dodge the pounce of a dark wolf fill the air for a moment. Minjun complains on why a dirty mud is attempting to attack him and tries to kill it with magic, but the demonic energy that he needs is completely depleted. That does not mean he is weak without it. A strong grasp to the wolf's head, and then he smashes it down to the ground, leaving a large impact to sidewalk. The yells and screams turn into silence as he continues to slam its head to the ground multiple times. The soldiers turn pale from the sight that is presented to them and become cautious to him. Minjun went through a hellish Spartan training that allows him to be strong despite not having magic. He then realizes and asks himself, why is there a monster from the other world here in Korea? What happened in the 2 years that he was gone? Moments later, they are seen driving down the highway in a military jeep. The soldier explains to him that he could have gone to jail for what he has done just now, but lets it go to avoid any escalation. The phenomenon of dungeons appeared years ago and the monsters inside poured out of them. With the appearance of dungeons, superhumans called the Awakened came to play. They are humans with abilities that surpass the level of average humans. Then the Hunter Cops was established by them and they completely wiped out the monsters as soon as they appeared. Even when the world is in shambles, Minjun only has one thing in mind: to game and relax, but it is really proving to be difficult due to his lack of updated internet services. The soldier accompanying him finds Minjun suspicious but won't pry any further for his own safety. Minjun demands information regarding to the evacuation of Korea's citizens, specifically game developers, and the destruction of Korea. The soldier is compliant to explain to him and also mentions that he has excellent grades for monster theory and dungeonology when he studied at university. He explains that the current state of the country was because of the weird phenomenon that started to spread from the dungeons 2 years ago. Dungeons appeared more frequently and much larger than normal, and the increasing number of giant monsters that kept coming from these strange dungeons. Because of this, the military could not handle the dungeons anymore and had to resort to locking down some of the civilian areas. As much effort the military have given since, it would not matter due to the lack of numbers they have. In Minjun's mind, on the other hand, he was concerned for the safety of gaming companies. The soldier suggests that Minjun should enlist for the military since he is around the appropriate age for it. Both regular soldiers and hunters require to serve for 5 years, and since Minjun is 21 right now, he should have received an enlistment letter by now. Minjun's goal on having the easy life and finally resting is about to crumble due to this new information. He then receives a text message that contains his enlistment letter that he will enlist tomorrow. He thinks of it as a spam mail, but the soldier confirms it to be real despite not having any physical examinations. The soldier asks him to double check it in the evacuation center's computer room, and with that a glint in Minjun's eyes sparkles. The sound of immense clicking of a mouse, the excitement of gaming, and multiple servings of junk food brings Minjun into tears. After depleting his needs to play games, he checks the internet for updated news articles regarding to what the soldier just explained. The world's current condition and his enlistment letter are all confirmed to be true. If Minjun had full tank of demonic energy, which was the source of his powers, he could conquer all the dungeons by himself, but right, he doesn't. Even when Minjun does not have his powers, he still has the strength and knowledge that he built up for 2 years. Even with that, he could still be able to conquer all the dungeons by himself. Then for a moment he had a spark for an idea, then he started playing. The next day, Minjun walks to the entrance for the enlistment as he munches down on some barbecue sticks. Sounds of farewells and cries fill the air as family members send off their children to train to fight against the monsters. But for Minjun, he was very much excited despite no family members greeting him off to battle. The soldiers call the attention of all upcoming soldiers to gather around the auditorium. The senior soldiers greet their new recruits with a barrage of hurtful words. Normal people would find this belittling and scary, however Minjun is beyond from normal. He thinks of the soldiers berating profanity to the new recruits as nice people when compared to the hell he went through in the other world, being whipped and starved like a slave without any hope for survival. The battalion commander in charge of the enlistment asks the new recruits to raise their hands if they wanted to apply to the Hunter Corps, and did not get the chance to. He explains that the treatment of them will be drastically different and the base pay for it will be W3 million. Silence fills the room and the commander assures them that it is okay for them to refuse as it was just a formality. However, one person raises their hand. Minjun was called forward to him and he complies. He jumps with great force to the point that the floorboards beneath him split open and he leaps above everyone in front of him, leaving them in shock and awe. The commander was dumbfounded by this and Minjun greets himself before him as recruit Kim Minjun. Gray ominous clouds fill the dark sky above mountains whose ground can be considered a sharp edge of a blade. In a cave found in the Forgotten Canyon in the northern region of Isgard, we can see our protagonist Minjun seating on a corpse of a dead spider. He starts to explain the logic behind the role of a dark mage. Dark mages have powerful skills that heavily rely on demonic energy, and demonic energy does not replenish itself naturally like mana of regular mages. It is collected by defeating monsters that contain demonic energy, making it an inefficient process cycle. And because of this downside, it hinders him on finding any party members, making a solo party. However, he explains the best method for a dark mage to replenish their demonic energy and retain it to a bunch of dead spiders around. Before he even starts explaining, the dungeon boss approaches behind him. A giant black spider with an exoskeleton hard enough to withstand an edge of a blade or the bluntness of a club. The mother of the spiders he killed, the Forgotten Canyon's hidden dungeon boss, Arachnus, looks upon her dead children and becomes enraged and begins to attack. Minjun taunts the angry mother and ends her mourning with a single uppercut to the face and smashes her head like a watermelon. As the mother's body falls to the ground, he continues with his explanation. To replenish demonic energy and to retain it in the best way is to defeat a monster with maxed out pure strength. Back to the present modern-day world, Kim Minjun is sitting in an office on standby while waiting for a troop from the Hunter Corps to come by and pick him up. The battalion commander praising Minjun for his enthusiasm to join the Hunter Corps despite the fact he can join the regular troops even with special abilities. Minjun proceeds to explain that he has business that needs to be accomplished in the dungeons, and the commander laughs at it as if he were joking, but in reality Minjun is far from joking around. Then he proceeds to explain that all dungeons that appear in Korea are managed by the military and the first priority regarding to the subjugation of the monsters belong to the Hunter Corps. The members of the Hunter Corps are a unit of highly trained individuals who can advance in ranks regardless of the service period as long as they can prove their abilities without any limits. Minjun plans on joining the Corps so he can have access to dungeons where he can clear majority of them by himself, then encounter monsters that have demonic energy and advance the ranks without any limits. He'll be able to recover his lost powers. He thinks he can accomplish all this in around 5 years, which makes him grin to the teeth. A knock on the door brings our attention towards to a soldier donned in black tactical clothing saluting to the battalion commander. Hunter Corps Sergeant Lee Sung-ho gives his greetings and the commander replies to him in a formal manner in comparison to the recent conversation he had with Minjun. Sung-ho asks Minjun if he really has any awakened abilities and asks him to confirm it by opening his status window and reveal all his stats. Minjun remains compliant and reminisces that status windows were also present in Isgard, but he barely checks it out because it only provides the numerical values of the owner's stats and abilities. But here in the modern world, he is presented with a surprise that even dumbfounds himself. Sung-ho asks for an explanation and Minjun has trouble on how to respond to him. He explains that his status window explains that there is an error as if it were one on a computer. Sergeant Sung-ho cannot believe what he is hearing at that moment. Around the same time but in a different location. In the Hunter Corps Training Center located around Gyeonggi-do, we see Battalion Commander Choi conversing with one of the recruits of the Corps. He reunites with a recruit named Sun Yunseo after 10 years. She is trying to avoid any special treatment during her training period because of her father, General Sun, and she wants to make that clear to the commander. The commander assures her that she will not be receiving any special treatment because the Hunter Corps is not an easy organization. He only called Yunseo as a form of curiosity because she is a renowned rookie, so he just wants to send a few words of encouragement before sending her off. He thanks her for enlisting as ordinary soldier instead of an executive despite her status and connections. Outside the window we see a military jeep drive by. This catches the commander's eye and shares to Yunseo a funny report that he recently received and offers Yunseo to meet an interesting recruit together. A few moments later we find ourselves inside a testing facility where Minjun will be tested since his status window shows an error. Minjun gives a curious aura from him and Sung-ho tells him to settle down because his enlistment in the Corps has not been decided yet. He will be personally testing Minjun because he is a special case, and once all the tests are completed and they confirm if he is lying or not, his fate will be undecided. Minjun finds him annoying and stingy and asks him what he should do for the test. Sung-ho proceeds to knock on a giant shiny rock shining in the color blood red like a ruby. He is tasked to move the stone at least an inch before 10 minutes for him to pass. The mineral is called red stone, a byproduct that was created from the dungeons, and not only is it incredibly dense and heavy for its size, it is also exceptionally hard. Sungho expects Minjun to fail miserably, but for Minjun on the other hand, it proves to be simple enough. Sungho doubts all of the reports that have been given to him about Minjun and thinks that he is only taking advantage of the title of the Hunter's Corps. At the background we can see Battalion Commander Choi and Yunseo watches the test unfold from the balcony top. Minjun recognizes the mineral as it was present in dungeons all over Isgard, and he says that it should be easy to push it at the given size. He swings his right arm back and strikes the stone with one powerful punch, shattering the dense and heavy stone into multiple shards and pieces. He was hoping for a bit of demonic energy inside the stone, but he was disappointed that there was nothing left except broken stones. A loud bang echoes the enforced testing room, and the sound of crumbling rubble shocked the people who saw what just happened. Red stone fragments all over the floor in front of our protagonist, Minjun. The blood-red shard marks the completion of the test and his acceptance to be enlisted by the Hunter Corps. Few days later, we see a recruit named Nam in Hyuk frantic and gasping of air as if he was tired from running away from something. It is revealed that it was just their daily exercise routine. Him and a large number of recruits have been running up the stairs with weights wrapped around their ankles. The training for the Hunter Corps is unlike any other training regime because it is set on a very high difficulty, so hunters will be prepared for any situation or battle that they might encounter in the future. The goal for the first training session of the new recruits is to climb up the infamous 6,000 steps while weighing yourself down with sandbags, as the instructor will be keeping you in check for your finishing time. The instructor for this training session is Sergeant Lee Seung-ho, also known as the Devil Instructor. Despite training with such crude methods of physical training, the numerical value of one's stats will increase only a tiny bit. In Hyuk thought that everyone will be suffering together, but he could not believe that the sight that is in front of him. Running as fast as they can with ease and speeds that can be considered, if not faster, to normal running. Minjun sprints up the steps with ease and a smile filled with joy and excitement. His body feels so light, and if he had his demonic energy he would be flying by now. Comparing to the hellish training he went through back in Isgard, this was a vacation for him. The quality of food being served to the recruits is amazing, and they get a large time period for free time and rest. There is even a computer room inside the facility that is the equivalent to civilian gaming cafes. He even considered using any little bit of demonic energy left inside of him if the facilities were not to his liking. He is living a life of luxury now, and he expresses his joy and sprints faster while leaving everyone else behind. Seung-ho hears a bunch of loud thudding and a dust cloud approaches him and is surprised to see Minjun up the steps in first place in less than an hour. Apparently Seung-ho made a proposal to the new recruits that if they manage to finish the training session in less than 30 minutes, they will be granted an outing pass, and Minjun is pestering him to check if he passed or not. And certainly enough he did. He accomplished it in 21 minutes. Seung-ho is proud of Minjun's results and he expects him to do better in the future. Later on, we are brought back to the barracks where all the new recruits just got back from the run. Pain is an understatement for them and is expressed by their scowls and aching bodies. However, for some it is worth it. Some of them even increase their stat points by 1 point, and to them it is a success. On the other hand, Minjun is surprised on how small the increase is comparing to what he got in Isgard's Hell training, where he got 10 points on a daily basis. The other recruits are envious of Minjun's success and say that he was the first person to obtain a pass from Sergeant Lee so far. The cheers and laughter of his comrades surprised him when he compares it to how the people of Isgard treated him when he was a dark mage, where they refused to look at him in the eye because it is bad luck. Some of the other recruits mention that the PC room is now available for use, and without wasting any time, Minjun ran as quickly as he could so he can spend his entire break time to gaming. As it was almost time for bed, he plans on going to sleep only for 2 hours, which was a luxury for him when compared to the sleepless nights back in Isgard. In the next day, the recruits are doing their training session where the goal is to complete a run of 40 kilometers if they want to eat breakfast. As expected, Minjun accomplished the task with ease and now taking a sip of water of victory. His fellow recruits envy his success, and in response he taunts them with the water that he was planning on sharing with them, and now they beg to him like chicks wanting food from their mother. After that fiasco, a man with a huge figure marches up the stage and demands the attention of his recruits. Lieutenant Lee expresses his disappointment to the recruits while referring to himself in the third person. He is disappointed that only half of the squad were able to pass the standard in the last week of the training. He is worried that by the end of the training half of them will die in a month and a half. He even doubts that they will be able to accomplish the last stage of the training, the dungeon adjustment training. Most dungeons will disappear once all of its monsters are defeated, but every now and then there are dungeons that still remain. and from that it will transform into a transforming dungeon that will change its internal structure on a daily basis that acts as a great training facility to experience all sorts of environments within the dungeons. The recruits panic when they hear the fact they have to go through that kind of training, and this is going along with the plan of the senior hunters. To yield better results, they plan on scaring the hunters but attract them by leading them on with a reward. The reward in question is a 3-day and 2-night vacation pass, but the reactions of the recruits were not expected by the seniors. Instead of being motivated, the recruits appeared more drained because they all know who they are competing against. Moments later, deep in the mountains, a grand blue portal looms above the hunters and intimidates the new recruits. Behind them, a military truck speeds up dangerously, which almost hits 2 people accidentally. In the truck bed, cages that had eyes that were looking at them with bloodlust. What was caged up in the back of the truck, and how dangerous is that to the safety of our protagonists? The ferocious hounds are inside that cage, scaring off their feet except for Minjun, as usual. It's their first time seeing the hound up close for the first time, while Minjun sees them as something equivalent to Maltese or Chihuahua. The lieutenant yelled at the weak recruit, telling them they would face them inside the dungeon. After that, he told them they would be divided into 4 recruits, each team to enter the transforming dungeon, and they would be given an hour to defeat the hounds and return. Before dispatching them, he told the recruits that if it hurt, they should strengthen their core, and if they were scared, they should use their brain and fight with everything they could. Except that, it's easier said than done to the recruits. After that, the first team is called to gear up individually with their superior grade military equipment with the Hunter Corps exclusive safety suit, MYD2. It is made to protect the physical body with its incredibly heavy and rough design. The recruits don't know what to feel about the suits, thinking they are too heavy. Minjun thinks the same thing since its design has no means of effectiveness or comfort but is only designed for defense, thinking that the cost, which is 50 million won, is not worth it. With its price, they must have always used them, imagining the smell of the user's passion and sweat with the suit, as Minjun was disgusted with its aura. With that, he asked the lieutenant bravely if he could take off the suit after defeating the hounds. The lieutenant thinks it was arrogant for a mere recruiter to say it, but seeing his familiar face, it's no surprise. To disinterest him more, the lieutenant pointed out that their training session today was ultimately a team training session, which prevents Minjun from outperforming his comrades. Looking forward to how the #1 recruit Kim Minjun takes care of his comrades. While the other team members are trying to devise a plan, Minjun is acting like it's an easy cake. All he has to do is teach them how to defeat a hound. With that, he called out his teammates' attention to discuss his plan. He started directly on how to kill the hound step by step, grabbing the hound's legs and snapping their backs in half, and they're still alive. He told them to fold their backs in opposite directions to rip them apart like kimchi. His eyes glistened, hopeful that his words lend them hope and adrenaline in facing off the hounds, but his comrade's face was gloomy, not understanding him. After that, they opened the cage door, releasing the hounds to the dungeon, where they instantly ran off. One of the recruits wondered why they didn't attack them instead, but Minjun responded by saying that they had been captured all day and must be desperate to go home, like it was so obvious. It is for Minjun since he knows what it feels like to seek home and feel like he's always trapped, remembering his days on Isgard and having PTSD. Their thoughts were interrupted when the lieutenant yelled at them, assuming they were laughing on the holy training ground. With that, the lieutenant informed them they would be the first to enter, causing panic, except for Minjun. With that, Minjun and his comrades make their way to enter the dungeon. Minjun complains about their armor limiting his moves and that he can't even greet the hounds with open arms. The lieutenant informed the instructors inside that the recruiters were on their way, commanding them to monitor and control the situation in case things got out of hand and the recruiters were in danger before getting confirmation from the instructors. The instructor saw the 4 recruiters and no other party. One of the instructors, Kim Minjun, noticed Kim Minjun as one of the recruits, looking forward to his performance. Given that Minjun shows the most prominent powers with his scores high on the chart for the past 4 weeks of training, that's why he's excited to see what will happen next. The hounds are attacking them on their back, and only Minjun sensed it. Seeing the hounds ready to pounce, he is also ready to knock their head as soon as they did. But since it's a team training session, he gave way for his comrades to experience. Afterward, Minjun told his comrade to face that way, complimenting himself for being considerate. They seem clueless as to what Minjun is pointing at, but the hounds appeared in a group, rushing towards them that they were about to run off despite Minjun assuring them that the suits were strong. He volunteered to take the lead as the hounds circled around them and attacked them, but Minjun got great reflexes, so it was easy for him to dodge and fight, knocking out one hound with a punch. Seeing his comrade struggling with a hound, he kicked it in the air. He told his comrade to fight bravely because the prey would think he was easy if he was scared. He pointed out that 2 people would die if this was a real battle, so he advised them to put pressure on the hounds to show them who is strong. His comrades did what he said, cornering the last hound, waiting for it to loosen its tension. The instructors watched them in awe, seeing the recruits bravely fighting the remaining hound instead of getting scared and losing their heads. But with Minjun's lead, they recover from their fear, giving them the courage to fight back. Knowing Minjun's outstanding leadership, Instructor Hejun assumes that he is the corps sergeant returning in the present before his enlistment. But one of the recruiters told them that stuff like that only happens in the novels. With that aside, they criticize their performance, impressed to see that Minjun solve it with his physical strength and leadership to encourage his comrades, cooperating alongside them, so Minjun would get the highest score while the others are average. Afterward, the instructors went down to their hiding spot, congratulating the recruits on their successful training and dismissing them. They escorted them back to the portal while Minjun was annoying Hejun if he was going to obtain a vacation pass. With the instructor's attitude, Minjun teases him for being a tsundere, a character who has a harsh personality but would gradually reveal a warmer side. Things were going well until they were near the portal and the ground shook hard, cutting off their contact with the outside world with their radio. They were confused about what was happening, but Minjun knew it was not an ordinary earthquake, but it was the transforming dungeon, transforming at the very moment. And a few moments later, a devastating phenomenon happened as they watched the portal exit closing in on itself. Minjun knows it's too late for them now, seeing that the exit is blocked. All their connections to the outside world are now non-existent, with the radio dead as the dungeon transformed quickly. The instructors thought they had over a month before the internal structure changed again. But there's only one thing to explain what happened. But first, they prioritized taking the new recruits to a safe place. When they found a spot, Corporal Kim Hejun informed them of an unexpected occurrence in the dungeon. Still, as mentioned in their dungeon manual, he assured them they had to wait an hour in their current spot and see if the dungeon entrance would open again. The recruiters were relieved to hear it, but the instructors knew that their situation was far worse than that. They further reassured the recruits by telling them that the lieutenant outside was already assessing their situation and would take proper steps. They needed to wait calmly instead of worrying. Their words may work on the other recruits, but none will work on Minju. He knows that the military uses this dungeon to train, certain that there won't be anything unexpected occurrence. Still, it's ominous that a dungeon entrance that was always open would suddenly close. The instructors may react calmly, but there's a chance that there is no such thing in the manual for such situations. Meanwhile, Minju already knew that the dungeon had transformed into an enclosed dungeon, which was harder to defeat than he thought, but it was just a complicated situation, not the worst, because he was there to save them. The instructor called out for Hejun to discuss their situation further, but they excused themselves to talk further from the new recruits. Instructor Hejun knew that the dungeon had become an enclosed dungeon since there were two instances when the dungeon entrance disappeared. First is when the dungeon dissipates, meaning they have defeated the monsters inside. The second case is the enclosed dungeon, when the portal gate disappears once an outsider enters. It only makes sense that more than one monster will appear since the only way out in an enclosed dungeon is by defeating every single monster within the dungeon. Assist from the outside is also impossible, so they must find a way to defeat it themselves. With 4 recruits who have no real battle experience and 2 instructors, all 6 of them must clear the dungeon. Instructor Hejun expected that the recruits would tense up once he informed them of their situation. They don't know when the monsters will appear, and if they're unlucky, it will be over for them. But sitting there and waiting is not an option either. They must keep moving while they still have their strength, yet he does think it would have been better if they were fully equipped because, with their rate, even a mere goblin could annihilate them since it takes him 10 minutes to take down one. The most realistic and successful action plan is to utilize the recruits' protective suits. If they use its defensive capabilities and put the recruiters up front, the instructors can have time to defeat the monsters as they try to hold them back. But these recruits trusted them and endured their hellish training, and to use them as a human shield is not a wise action as a senior. His self-esteem also won't allow it. After walking, one of the recruits complained about how unfortunate it was to have a dungeon incident during their last week of training and kept moving. But Minju stopped and sniffed the air, sensing something. Suddenly, Instructor Hejun was choking and fell to the ground with foam coming from his mouth. The other instructor rushed to him as Minju tried to stop. But it was too late, they were both choking on the ground. The recruiters were worried and unsure about what happened, but Minju told them to step back or else they would face the same situation. Surprised they had just fainted, he approached them and tossed them near the recruits. Minju ordered them to stand near the exit as they went deep into the dungeon, ignoring what the others were saying. Minju was excited, his adrenaline fired up, knowing that what he was looking for also existed on Earth. The demonic energy, the reason the instructors fainted, and what Minjo craved. It's no surprise seeing the awakened instructors pass out because even Asgardians veiled themselves with special protection spell that protects them against demonic energy before facing the monsters. Demonic energy is also fatal for ordinary humans. However, demonic energy to dark mages is like chargers to a dead phone. Running towards the overwhelming power, he now located the source of the dense demonic energy. The chamber seems quiet, and he can't find any traces of the monster anywhere. But its overpowering energy wouldn't hide it when facing a dark mage. Minju didn't expect to meet the Dark Hound on Earth, but he couldn't complain. The Dark Hound is an absolutely overpowering species compared to ordinary hounds. It was also the first monster he faced after he was summoned to Asgard. He nearly died from it because he had never seen such monsters in all the monster guide he read on Earth, hence facing off with one. But now they have met again, he's glad to see a familiar face. As the Dark Hound launches toward Minju to attack, he dodges and counterattacks, almost crushing it in one punch. The Dark Hound's big demonic energy spills after its death, so they are difficult to defeat. One of the factors is their venomous blood, which is lethal to ordinary humans. Once it comes into contact with it, their skin would rot. The dark energy was getting sucked by Minju, not minding the blood in its knuckles because he was no ordinary human. He was a dark mage. Now that Minju had absorbed the demonic energy from the Dark Hound, he felt excited about tasting it for the first time in a long while. It felt like he was charged about 5%. But something bothered him, knowing that dark hounds can be found normally in Asgard. He wondered what it was doing on Earth. Although he did consider that monsters on Earth can harbor demonic energy, judging by how the instructors reacted, it must be their first time encountering one. He also can't recall mentioning demonic energy or monsters that wield it during their monster education at the training center. The other explanation he can think of is the Dark Hound managing dimensional travel on its own. But that is also impossible since it can only be done by someone like him who has reached the peak of his dark magic powers or by the saint who can utilize God's power. Other than that, no one can use and master it immediately. But he seems to overthink the situation, so instead, he looks for the corpse to report to his seniors. After a while back to the recruits, the instructors were slowly gaining consciousness, faintly hearing the recruits' words. After that, Instructor Hajun jerked up, asking them if they were injured or hurt, not knowing what had happened. The recruits assured them they were all right. They also told them that Minju had gone deeper into the dungeon by himself and explained what had happened. Instructor Hajun was furious about Minju's doing, letting it out on the recruit and shaking him aggressively. Instructor Hajun was enraged at how Minju behaved. With that behavior, he could immediately kick him into the military. But given their situation, he has no authority to say that since he was also feeling guilty for fainting instead of protecting the recruits. Instead of letting his emotion get him, he composes himself to rescue Minju immediately. But Minju appeared from the darkness with the Dark Hound on his shoulder before he could, asking them if they were all right. The instructors were surprised to see a massive hound with him as Minju tossed it in front of them. The instructors inspect the monster, suspecting that it's the cause of their fainting, while the other recruits are just as surprised that Minjun defeated the scary-looking hound all by himself. But a few moments later, the gate opened again. Instructor Hajun asked Minjun if he really defeated the hound, to which he nodded in agreement. After that, he dispatched the others except for Minjun so he could have a word with him before leaving. He starts by telling Minjun to report everything in detail to the lieutenant, even when they, as instructors, are being incompetent for fainting since they have no excuse even if they get sent to the military prison. Aside from that, Hajun thanked Minjun for saving them without hurting others. This acknowledgement made Minjun shy as Hajun made his final remarks that, as a man, it's right to admit when they're wrong, and he is not scared of it before heading back, knowing that he won't be getting any sleep tonight. Minjun was touched by the instructor's compliments and was ready to leave when the status window suddenly appeared, startling him. It notified him that the error had now been fixed. He cussed out the system for being delayed and useless until the content of his status made him shut up. It shows that Minjun bears the title for being the founder of the cult. Lumi Nuna is my favorite character, and the rest of his strength, agility, stamina, and demonic energy are low. Regarding the cult, Lumi is a character from the game Dungeon Power Fighter, and it all started as a joke back in Asgard. He accidentally created it to eliminate the fanatics who always follow him around like stalkers, but in the end, it only created more fanatics. Aside from that, his status shows that he is weaker than when he was a dark mage. After returning to Earth and discovering that all his demonic energy was gone, he already expected it due to dimensional travel. Yet he was concerned that on his long list of skills, only one remained, the corruption, which was in the lowest class. He knows he can't reach his objective at that rate, but if he had reached the peak of his dark magic before, he could do the same. For now, he cleared his objective and changed it to recover his powers as soon as possible for the sake of the game company, Dungeon Power Fighter. On that day, the entire training center was in chaos by the dungeon gate closing while in a training session, and the fact that the lieutenant had not given clear orders. But the highlight of that day was when a mere recruit managed to defeat a new species of monster while the instructors in charge didn't do anything to help because of their unprecedented series of events. After the incident, the recruits who should have received the private ranks and enjoyed their dispatch are on standby in their quarters until they're given further notice. The recruits complained out of boredom while the others talked about Minjun defeating a hound himself with the recruit stuck in the dungeon with him. They discussed whether Minjun could get the rank of sergeant within 2 years, but the others said that the advancement exams are tougher than they say since they heard that most of the previous recruits were discharged as corporals, even if they stay for the full 5 years. The other hunters were discharged at private first class, still a depressing rank. Meanwhile, in the office of the lieutenant, Kim Minjun introduced himself to his seniors, saluting in respect. The lieutenant also salutes while punishing the one that didn't check the dungeon before using it as a training ground. After the others were dismissed from the room, the lieutenant immediately went to business, offering Minjun a special proposal. A crane in a flock of chickens is an idiom that describes someone outstanding in a bunch of ordinary. The lieutenant knows the crane is before him, thinking it would be a waste if such a talent like that were to join the regular ranks. He used his position and rank to give him a good offer. The lieutenant mentioned that Minjun wants to advance as soon as possible, but because of their rules, privates like Minjun cannot take promotion exams for another year. However, since the lieutenant sees much potential in him, he grants him an exception and offers to join the Hunter Corps in Chiorwan of Gangwon-do. He says this with much enthusiasm and gladness, convincing him that he doesn't have to wait another year if he accepts. But he expected him to get excited as well, yet greeted by an uncomfortable silence that the lieutenant must have thought he had gone too far and that his promotion wasn't enough for him. In Minjun's mind, he was gathering the knowledge he knew about the squad in Chiorwan, 104th Division, Invincible Hunter Squad. The place his comrades told him to avoid at all costs because of the freezing weather and the snow that constantly falls that piles up a lot. Not only that, but the dungeons and monsters appear out of the blue, and it is considered the most extreme out of most front lines. Yet, that's also what Minjun wants since he doesn't really care where he would be deployed if he was to advance. Granted, to have a once-in-a-lifetime promotion like that is also amazing. On top of that, there would be lots of dungeons. That way, he can battle through them and take demonic energy to regain his power. For his plan to work, he needs to advance at all costs. The higher his rank, the greater his scope of activities will be, and that's obviously no greater way to get a promotion than to accomplish stuff in the dungeons. The lieutenant didn't get an answer right, so as Minjun was taking his time to think, he was already accepted getting refused, that the moment Minjun spoke up to accept the promotion, he was surprised. With that, Minjun was immediately deployed at Chiorwan. Minjun was accompanied by his comrade, Private Choi, on the way to Chiorwan. Choi was teary-eyed to see his partner being deported away from him, so he yelled at Minjun to update him once he got to his base. But Minjun knew he was acting up in front of the people, knowing well that he won't kill him first. With that, Choi asked if Minjun was sure to volunteer in a place that everyone avoided. But Minjun confidently says that he has a greater goal in his life that they didn't know. Choi densely asked if it was like achieving the max level 100 times, but Minjun said he already achieved that yesterday and hit his 30th max level. Afterward, the van left with Choi as they both bid their farewell. Now that the loudest person had left, it was then that Minjun realized he was by himself, until a heavy military car came aggressively, almost hitting him. Somebody from that battalion came to greet and welcome Minjun with a stoic face. He apologized indirectly for the delay since it was snowing. But Minjun didn't see any snow. With a snappy move, the man informed Minjun to depart their way to the squad and ordered him to enter the back. As they drive towards the headquarters, Minjun can't believe he will start his life as a soldier once they get to the base. It doesn't matter to him if he were to train harshly or battle monsters frequently, there's only one thing he is concerned about, which is hazing. He can't imagine himself nor want to end up in a miserable situation because he lacks patience and only focuses on his objectives. He has no choice but to endure it because if he hits his superior once, he might be sent to the military prison as a regular soldier. After a while of driving, they finally arrived at the base camp of the Hunter Corps 104th Division, 2nd Battalion. As soon as they arrived, the commander guided Minjun to his quarter, leaving his care to the other soldiers. The soldiers looked at him with depressing expressions, except for two sergeants with orange hair and peach. Their eyes glistened at the word newbie as they asked for Minjun's name. Familiar with his name, the orange-haired guy exclaimed that he must be the super soldier in the rumor that he defeated a new species of hound by himself. With that, they tossed his belongings to the lower-ranked soldiers in the quarter as they talked to Minjun more. Meanwhile, their behavior made Minjun assume that they must be the alphas of the dormitory since they were looking at him with joyous expressions as if they had received a new toy. After that, the peach-haired guy asked him why he chose to be there when he could be at the rear if he was as good as they said in the rumor, but Minjun replied that he wanted to gain real experience in the front line and advance his way in. The two arrogant sergeants just laughed at him for being crazy. They continued to annoy Minjun by asking him about a sibling or his girlfriend as if he had any. With that, they asked him if he could show them his talent, which Minjun considered so they could leave him alone. He proposed that he could show them a one-finger push-up, but they couldn't accept it since they do it all day. But Minjun showed them his one-finger push-up vertically before they could react more. It was their first time seeing someone who could do that in their platoon, saying he was already a sergeant. A few minutes later, a real sergeant came to the room with a frightening aura. The two arrogant sergeants booed the sergeant as Minjun turned around, seeing the devil instructor's face, Lee Seung-ho. Seung-ho was also surprised to see him in their quarters that he couldn't utter a word. The two arrogant provoked Seung-ho, telling him he was now pretending to be exhausted just because he was dispatched as an instructor. They even envied him because he got to have a vacation for tormenting kids. But Seung-ho yelled at them to leave him alone, so they did after a while of pestering and cussing at him. Seung-ho admitted they were pissing him off, but he could not hit them because he was not more advanced than them. After that, Seung-ho lay down in his area and watched a video on his phone about volcanic dungeons as his leisure while Minjun was just observing the soldiers and their differences in ranks, thinking about the ethics where everyone was divided and couldn't move freely because of their ranks. Remembering that there's a newbie and as a sergeant in the platoon, he assigned a private first class, Lee Dongjin, to properly instruct the newbie. As Dongjin introduced himself to him, he couldn't help but question if he really was a senior to him. After that, Dongjin proposed that they can talk over the details of food since he received a special permit to visit the PX or the Post Exchange, a retail store found in a military installation. Once they arrived at the PX, Dongjin volunteered to pick whatever he wanted to eat as his treat, but Minjun warned him he eats a lot, yet Dongjin still insisted. This made a good impression on Minjun that he was nice for letting him pick whatever he wanted, but as soon as they went to the counter to check out, Dongjin almost regretted it as the cashier saw him shivering as if he was cold. The two sat at a table as Minjun ate his chips like a glutton. He wondered why they were not allowed to use the PX regularly because Dongjin mentioned a special permit. Dongjin explained that private first class and below can only visit on weekends, and as a private first class and above, they are benefited from having access to the gym, and only the corporal and above can access the PC rooms. This shocked Minjun, knowing he couldn't freely use the PC as he wished, even if he had spare time. But Dongjin said it may be unreasonable, but a private first class like him can't resolve something as big as that, they just have to get used to it. But Minjun didn't seem to hear what he said and exclaimed if there was a way to change that system. So Dongjin explained to him that he would need to advance at least to the rank of a corporal or a sergeant to attempt it. But it's uncertain if such it's an easy task to do. Minjun was pissed after knowing this because restricting the PC room was over the line. He just needed to find a way to advance his rank. Dongjin further said that it was no easy task to become a sergeant in the Hunter Corps because he even failed the advancement exam many times, so he stayed as a private first class for 3 years. But Minjun cheered him up that he would advance next time, but in his mind, he also badly wanted a promotion to bring Dongjin along with him. A few minutes later, somebody interrupted their conversation. It was Corporal Kim Gwangshik. Gwangshik is Dongjin's senior, so whatever he wants to do, Dongjin just lets him, even letting him eat their food. Minjun was displeased by his interruption, but he didn't say anything. Because of it, Gwangshik must have felt awkward, so he told the rookies that he won't be saying anything while they chatted but warned them that if they were useless during their firearm training tomorrow, they would be dead in his hands, not letting them off easily. The mention of the firearm training made Dongjin remember that he was about to brief the newbie to inform him about it since it's different from the others. This made Gwangshik question whether he overstepped his boundaries, telling Dongjin that he might be overly concerned even if he was doing well. Gwangshik keeps asking Dongjin why he's still a private first class, thinking he's dumb since he failed a lot on the advancement examiners. Hearing their conversation, Minjun was pissed at how much Gwangshik underlooked the rookies, so he did something mischievous. While Gwangshik keeps blabbering to Dongjin and eating their food, Minjun uses his dark power to corrupt his stomach, making him feel uneasy suddenly. The effect was immediate that Gwangshik suddenly stood up and panicky looked at the chips and soda's expiration dates. To keep his cool and ego, he did his best to keep a straight face despite feeling uneasy in his stomach as he told them they should return to their quarters soon before leaving. Minjun was proud of his powers. Even if they became weak, it was still useful at times like that. He was pleased with how Guangxik left, questioning what he accidentally ate. Now that Guangxik is gone, Minjun asks Dongjin about the firearms training. So he explained that they are to use and fire a KX-2 with ICM bullets, much harder than ordinary bullets since they are used by the Hunter Corps against large monsters. If they used an ordinary ICM bullet like the one in the training center, it would only feel like a pony. But for their type of ICM bullets, it would feel like you're training a wild stallion that sounds like a cannon firing. This was made since monsters appear more frequently than before. The military must have much more powerful equipment. But Dongjin warned Minjun politely, saying that it would feel awkward at first. But all he needed to do was get ready to get scolded. Hearing what Dongjin said, he was impressed by the analogy he used to explain to Minjun simply. But to think that he also went through firearm training back on Isgard with a firearm equivalent to an elephant, he would rather be glad to tame a wild stallion. Minjun was so excited about tomorrow's training that his face couldn't hide it. Yet Dongjin was still concerned about what happened to Corporal Kim Guangxik. The day went by, and first thing in the morning, soldiers packed their things and went to the firearm training facility. Training began as they hit a board with a printed hound. Whoever got the most direct hits would get the high score. It was Minjun's turn as he hit the target with a headshot, bummed that he missed a single shot. The trainer waved the red flag as he announced Minjun's score, 19 direct hits and 1 miss. Hearing his score, the soldiers were surprised that they couldn't believe it was his doing. Some say that he's a shooting machine, while others say he just had dumb luck. But it's impossible to be using a fire gun and can ace it for the first time. The two arrogant sergeants saw and heard it as the orange-haired Sergeant Cho compared his record, which was 14 shots, thinking it was above average for the squad. Senior Lieutenant Kim Mincheol and First Sergeant Hyo Tseok were widely impressed with his performance. They heard about the rumors about Minjun, but it's crazy to see it personally. The arrogant sergeants approached Minjun just to yell at him for how he shot like that. Minjun just said that he shot it like he was instructed, but it's not like the others weren't excited but still can't shoot like he do. Then Sergeant Kim Minji complimented them on how well Minjun did on his first firearm training. He looked forward to seeing his performance during that afternoon's special firearm training. Minjun doesn't know what he is talking about, but the two arrogant sergeants act harshly after knowing that Minjun will attend the special firearm training, especially Sergeant Cho, who wants to take him down. After Minjun escaped from their chaotic energy, he went to Dongjin. He was greeted by applause, and Dongjin complimented and congratulated him for doing great on his training, saying he could have gotten a vacation if he hit it with a perfect 20 shot. But Minjun remembered that he was invited to the special firearm training, so he asked Dongjin about it since he didn't hear much. Dongjin apologized because he didn't get to explain what special firearm training was since he didn't expect Minjun to be a good shooter. Also, new recruits are normally exempted from the special training since they take a while to get used to handling their improved ICM bullets, but since Minjun adapted well, he gave him a brief explanation and what to expect. However, they would go through a briefing first before starting. The special firearm training consists of the two-person team entering the training facility and eliminating monsters as they go to their destination. As they go through it, they would fight to move and live targets. Although they are not highly dangerous, there will be executives in case something goes wrong, which rarely happens. The soldiers should be ready to counter their attacks, and another thing to watch out for is the civilian target plates that would pop up out of nowhere. If they hit them, they are automatic failures no matter how many monsters they have defeated. For Minjun, as soon as Dongjin mentioned that they would be fighting live monsters, his eyes glistened with excitement. After that good firearm training, the soldiers crowd the cafeteria for their meal, leaving a big smile on Minjun's mouth because there's nothing better than dark magic and food. As Minjun and Dongjin sit together, Dongjin still can't believe how great a shooter Minjun is, as if he was born to be a soldier. But Minjun returned the compliment by saying that Dongjin's 13 hits were also a good result. This compliment made Dongjin flattered that someone acknowledged his skill. He told him that he had time to actually had experience with it but said that he isn't that good compared to Sergeant Lee Seung-ho, who is the real deal with his average fires of 17 direct hits, which makes him the #1 shooter in their squad. But now that Minjun is there with 19 direct hits, it made him #1, though he did admit that the sergeant is good since the average hit in their squad is 10. After that, Minjun mentioned to Dongjin that there was a two-person team in the special training and asked him to join him. But Dongjin doesn't think it's possible because the executives are the ones to decide on the teams, so it's no guarantee. With that, Minjun asked him about the criteria for assigning team members, but Dongjin explained briefly that, according to the rumors, it is done through the ladder lottery. This game is designed to create random pairings between two sets of things or people. After their meal, Minjun returned to the firearm training facility, where the lieutenant informed them that the training would commence after 5 minutes. so they must put on their bulletproof vest first and stand by. As Minjun was silent in the squad, the annoying Guangxik approached Minjun since they were teammates. Guangxik underlooks him again for being a newbie, pointing out that a corporal and a private are two distinct ranks. Minjun wasn't prepared nor wanted to be his teammate, especially if he was getting on his nerve. He knew Guangxik would still continue hazing, but he had a good plan to handle that. Guangxik told him that the average final time is 3 minutes and wanted to improve that score. He threatens Minjun that he should finish it within 3 minutes, and if he doesn't see him in there, he will regret it. But Minjun kept his cool and didn't say anything to him, not tolerating his threats. Of course, Guangxik takes his silence as a weakness, certain that he can't beat him in the next round. Yet Minjun only responds politely but forcefully, thinking that Guangxik is a lost cause once the battle. Guangxik's attitude remains arrogant as he keeps saying that he doesn't care about Minjun's performance, but if he finishes later than him, he will die, as he points at the team before them and sees what they will do. The two soldiers to battle are Sergeant Kim Moongi and Sergeant Jiang Hanyang with the pigtail. As the two shooters prepare, they descend into the underground facility in individual elevators. The training is meant to be tactical for slaying monsters while protecting civilian target plates in an enclosed area. However, inside the military, it has mutated into a competition amongst troops to determine who is the weakest. They aim to complete the trial as fast and cleanly as possible and press the finish button at the end destination before your opponent. As the two shooters move towards the button, their movements are tracked and seen on a big screen so other soldiers can watch them. The monster's logo varies in size, and Guangxik explained to Minjun that the more dangerous the monster is, the bigger the icon. There would be 2 monsters placed on each lane. What the shooter would encounter is completely random, so they can't know what to expect until they enter. As for Moongi, he encounters a rake toad in his first lane. He struggles to fight it but eventually comes around. Moongi moved faster than Hanyang, but due to the monster he faced, Hanyang would catch up since he was only dealing with a mutated rat. However, as he gets through his next lane, the monster he is about to face is a desert worm 50 times bigger than the ordinary, with a terrifying aura that freezes Hanyang on his feet. Meanwhile, on the other lane, Moongi encountered 2 rake toads in a row, thinking that Hanyang might have finished before him, given that he struggles a lot. But as he got there, he only saw an empty room with the red button wide open, so he pressed it without wasting enough time. They completed the round within 2 minutes and 24 seconds, which is the best record in the training. The other soldiers watching cheer in glee, pitying Hanyang for encountering the desert worm at the other end of his lane. A few minutes later, in the underground training facility, Hanyang showed up late in the end part of the lane as Moongi teased him for being late. Since Moongi won that round and as per their bet, he told Hanyang that he should treat him at the PX. He also pointed out that Hanyang had a civilian and it was a headshot, so he's clearly disqualified. As the two ascended up from underground, Guangxik heard them still arguing about their fight. Since Minjun heard about the previous shooters making a bet, he proposed to Guangxik that they should too. Guangxik was uncertain if he heard it right, but Minjun confirmed bravely that whoever was the loser would grant the winner a wish like a man. Guangxik only laughed hard, impressed that a newbie was willing to make a bet with a corporal. He thought Minjun felt somewhat bigger than anybody else just because the seniors were nice to him, so he accepted his bet. His wish is something a mere private can grant. Instead, he wishes for him to give his salary to him for 3 months if Minjun loses. As for Minjun, he thinks his wish is typical of a simpleton since it's always the money. Still, Minjun accepted this as if he would just give him a tissue every month. Dongjin heard their conversation and was concerned about Minjun, but the lieutenant called off for the next shooters to get ready to descend as he checked the shooters to see if they had questions to ask. Later, the 2 shooters descend into the underground. As Minjun descended, he admitted that he fell for Guangxik's cheap provocation. He didn't want to stick out like a sore thumb, but he was running out of patience and wasn't mature enough to sit by when someone provoked him. The soldiers upstairs are full of talks about the corporal and the private making a bet. It's clear to them that the corporal would win because he's a corporal. They even underestimate Minjun if he can defeat the monsters or if the corporal rescues him. But a few minutes later, the ground shook harshly, and it wasn't an earthquake as they saw the monster icon on the screen moving to the first lane. Minjun felt the ground shake, and as he got to the first lane, he saw the massive monster devouring the smaller one. Minjun came in face to face with the terrifying monster called Cyclops. Minjun was confused about what the Cyclops was eating, but for some reason, the Cyclops became a menace and attacked Minjun using the core of the rat it was eating. Minjun dodged it with his good reflex and weirdly wondered what their dinner menu would be after the training, hoping for a fried chicken so he could eat it as a reward after the training. As he was studying the monster, he noticed the civilian target placed around the area, which he mustn't shoot recklessly or he'll be disqualified. The Cyclops was on a rampage as it kept attacking Minjun, so he must also counterattack. The Cyclops leave him no choice but to use his corruption skill and his fist to deal damage on the Cyclops. The Cyclops is now badly hurt, all Minjun has to do is shoot it down. However, the monster regenerated its arm, turning it into a blade, ready to attack Minjun again. Meanwhile, back in the spectating area, the soldiers were worried for the newbie Minjun, seeing that he was dealing with the dangerous monster. The lieutenant saw this and knew the newbie was battling with the Cyclops. The monster is also known as the Devouring Demon because once it consumes a source of energy, its regenerative and attack capabilities will increase drastically until digestion. However, the Cyclops wouldn't have attacked unless it sensed its life was in danger. Plus, it broke free from captivity and got enraged after eating the other monster in the lane, so the lieutenant wondered how and what could have provoked it. While the others are worried about the newbie, Minjun is having fun dealing with the Cyclops, attacking him with every move he got, thinking that it would be easier to beat the heck out of the monster, but since he was in firearm training, it would be logical to shoot it. He blinded the Cyclops, making it screech from the pain as Minjun rushed towards it, ready to attack again. But the monster could sense and predict his movement despite getting blinded. Luckily, our Minjun is no ordinary human and got a god complex, so he dodged that close call attack but was stomped to the ground. As I said, Minjun got a god complex by stopping the monster's attack and standing straight without budging. It makes sense to him now how the monster sensed and detected his movement twice in a row. It was all because of the Cyclops reacting to his demonic energy. A few moments later, the lieutenant descended underground, about to rescue Minjun. He blamed himself for causing such a catastrophe and letting the newbie fight the most dangerous monster in the lane, knowing that a mere newbie can't defeat a monster like the Cyclops with a firearm. So he rushed towards the lane where the monster was, hoping not to see Minjun dead. On the other hand, Guangxik rushes towards the button after defeating the monsters on his lane, hopeful that he can clock in within 2 minutes and 30 seconds, faster than Minjun does. He was confident enough to say that Minjun already failed, even wondering how he would spend the salary he would get, already daydreaming about his vacation. But as soon as he arrived, he saw Minjun looking at the red button intently, pushing it as soon he noticed Guangxik's presence, letting him watch his failure face to face. Guangxik was shocked that he could arrive earlier than him and couldn't accept it. But back to the lieutenant, he was also surprised to see the Cyclops defeated, wondering how Minjun could shoot for it to end up like that. After that, they ascended, and Minjun was greeted by applause and cheers from the other soldiers for finishing the training in under 2 minutes, even calling him a monster newbie. They were so impressed to know that a private defeated a Cyclops by himself, worried that it would turn into an accident. A few moments later, Dongjin came rushing to check on Minjun, but he assured him he wasn't hurt. They were busy asking him how he did it as Guangxik felt bitter about his defeat. One of the soldiers mentioned that they had placed a bet, and since it was clear that Minjun had won. But Guangxik slapped his head hard, surprising the soldier. Guangxik told them that the round wasn't fair, so the bet was off. He further underestimated the newbie, still not accepting that he had failed. He pointed out that the special training is designed to beat 2 monsters before reaching the destination. He defeated the 2 monsters successfully, but Minjun only fought 1, so he concluded that he would have been quicker if Minjun were to fight 2 monsters. Dongjin is about to defend his comrade, but Guangxik keeps blabbering on him. Minjun was pissed as he thought he didn't feel good about defeating the Cyclops with his fist. That's why he planned to drop the bet. However, Guangxik was behaving rudely and was taking it out on Dongjin instead of me. But before he could do anything, someone spoke firmly that Cyclops are meek. Still, once they are provoked, the danger would increase drastically, so anyone with common sense would know that Minjun faced a much tougher situation than Guangxik. The soldiers turn around, seeing Sergeant Lee Seung-ho. This calmed down Guangxik, and he started to sweat, but he still won't lower his pride and was teasing him that he should stop showing off his rank to the juniors. But Sergeant Seung-ho quickly countered him by pointing out that he was showing off his rank. Because of this, Guangxik tried to lighten up to stop him from embarrassing him in front of the juniors, saying that he was only joking and was nothing serious. But Seung-ho knows him well and doesn't tolerate his behavior, so he bumps him purposely, saying that everything that's not going on his way is a joke. Aside from that, he provoked Guangxik more by telling him that it is nice to have a higher rank because the stubborn mules he considered a senior before would become surprisingly obedient. This turned Guangxik intensely red from anger, but he could not do anything about it. Seeing this made Minjun smirk pleasingly. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. Well guys, if you like this video and you want a second part, comment below with the word part 2. Also subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.